As we continue solving the gross pay program using Flowgorithm, let's add a comment that says input operations. And so we're going to ask the user to enter employee's name as outlined in our pseudocode. Next, we'll ask for the hours worked by the employee. So we may say, how many hours did, and you notice I have, and let me make this look a little bit larger. I scaled the icons as well as when I bring in the various symbols such as output and input, and I go to open those up, the scale is larger so you can see what I am typing a little bit better. An output statement, we're going to say how many hours did, and you notice I have a string literal. I'm going to use an AND key because I am concatenating or adding a string literal with a variable and maybe another string literal. So when I want to add different objects together, I use the AND key in Flowgorithm, which is comparable to using the plus symbol in other languages such as Python. And I'm going to say name, quote, blank space, work. The reason for the blank space inside of my double quote just prior to the work word is because whenever you concatenate string literals and variables, they all run together. And if you want there to be some separation, sometimes you have to add blank spaces at the end of a string literal as it follows a variable, and at the beginning of a string literal as it comes after a variable. And then next I'll say input hours worked. That's the variable name we chose to represent the placeholder or the memory location where the hours worked will be stored, just like name. If I enter a name, it's going to get stored in that variable or placeholder location. And then the next statement is I'm going to have an output statement followed by an input statement. And this will say, what is the pay rate of name, that is the employee, and I'll just add a question mark at the end. And then, of course, the variable name that will store what the user enters is pay rate. Flowgorithm does not allow us to use variable names of underscores in a variable name, so that's the reason why I don't have it. However, I'm using the camel case. Next, we're going to process the data that was entered. So we'll call this processing or calculations. We're going to use an assignment statement to process or find out what the gross pay is. Pay is equal to the hours worked times the pay rate. So you notice whenever you're going to be assigning or doing some sort of a processing in a flow chart, it will acknowledge this by using the rectangle symbol. So if you look to my far right, we're following along with the pseudocode. It's just that we're representing it visually in the Flowgorithm. Input the employee's name, the hours worked, the hourly rate. We calculate the gross pay. And next, we're going to just display the employee's name, the hours worked, the employee's pay rate, and the employee's gross pay. So we add the output symbol, and then we're going to say employee name, and we'll just say name there. Hours worked. Hours worked, variable name. You notice that there's a label or a caption. Hours worked. That is string literal, in closing quotes. But the variable name, as we define it, is hours worked, no blank spaces, and we're using the camel case rule. And next we'll say pay rate. Pay rate. And next we'll do gross pay. And if we want to add a dollar sign by the gross pay, we can do that. Gross pay. We can go back and do the same thing to the pay rate. The gross pay, the pay rate. Hours worked, we don't need that. Okay, so we have those four statements. Employee's name, the hours they work, the pay rate, the gross pay in the main program as our comment. And now we're going to save this program. Okay, so let's take a preview of what this flow diagram looks like. We start off with the oval shape, meaning it's the start of the main program. You have your comments. We declare, define any variable names that are used in the program. Why is this important? Because most programming languages will not even allow you to utilize any storage locations unless they have been defined, they have been more or less declared, and you have to tell the computer what kind of data is to be stored there. That is the purpose. Python lets you do it by, in your input statements, you utilizing the data type called float, or if there's nothing there, it's string, or we may say int for integer. So this is what the program looks like. It's a pretty linear type system or setup. Okay, so I'm going to make this a little smaller so you can kind of see the program a little bit better. And I'll zoom in a little bit more. Okay, let's run the program to see if there are any syntactical errors or logic errors. We're going to click on the play button, or you can go on the program and click run or press function key 5. Either one of these will work. So we'll click the play button. This is what shows up. Please enter the employee's name. I'll put in Samuel Jackson. How many hours did Samuel Jackson work? 40. What is his pay rate? $39.75. And now you see the displays or the print statements. Employee name, Samuel Jackson, hours worked 40. pay rate $39.75, gross pay $1,590. The advantage of using this flowchart program is that you can test it to see if your logic works. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to tell the computer to take this flowchart and convert it to Python. So we're going to go on the Tools and choose Source Code Viewer or press Function key 12, or there's a dedicated button for that. Let's see if it shows up. I don't think so because we have to move this over some more. This is the Source Code Viewer dedicated icon. We'll just go through Tools, choose Source Code Viewer, and by default, it's going to show auto pseudocode. So what it did was this flow diagram created a pseudocode, a false code, and this is what you see on the screen. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go to this arrow, this down arrow, and change to any of those 29 languages that Flowgorithm can convert over to. If I wanted to convert it to C#, Bash, Auto, Hotkey, AppleScript, C#, C++, Fortran, Groovy, and so on. There are over 29 different languages. I'm going to choose Python. Once I tell it to express it in Python, I need to save that version. So I'm going to press the Save button. And then it'll allow me to save it, giving it a name. If I start typing in whatever name I had, I think I said Growth Pay Part 1. And it is going to save it as a Python version. I do want to emphasize that once you put in Gross Pay Part 1, which was the name of the original Flowgorithm program, make sure that the .fprg is not on there because it's no longer a Flowgorithm program. It becomes a py or Python program when you save it. We go to the same folder where we saved the Flowgorithm version, and it now saves the Python version. I can right-click, choose Edit with Idle, and it opens up. Let's go to Options, Line Number, and you see all of the comments came up. The declarations didn't because Python automatically places the declarations or the data types through the way that we enter the data. So you notice this shows up as a float, this shows up as a float. One thing though that we need to start doing, and that is anytime you have a variable where you're going to take that variable and store calculations, it is a good idea to initialize that variable. Gross pay is equal to 0.0. That just tells the computer to initialize or preset memory to 0.0. In case there's something in that memory where gross pay was, it's going to erase it and put the 0.0 just to ensure accuracy of the calculations. And so this is the program as a basic version of the program as it is. It has been converted from Flowgorithm to a Python code. Stay tuned for the next segment that talks about adding more to the Flowgorithm program and going in and making some different changes to this program so that it will reflect F strings. You have to do that inside the Python program itself.